The plain meaning of our Torah text this morning could not be more clear. God speaks to Rebekah. Vayomer Adonai la. God spoke to her. And yet our 2,000-year-old interpretive tradition could not accept the fact that Rebekah was probably a prophet and certainly someone who moved our covenantal history forward. They said that she had to go to a male intermediary in order to hear God's word. Because of Isaac's passivity, she could not be the active one. Now, we could be morally outraged by that, but for 2,000 years of a culture that everyone was inculcated in, men and women alike, this was just the way that it was. It took many years and many different circumstances to give birth to the feminist movement, both in society and in Jewish tradition. I bring it up today because this past week, or I think it was a week and a half ago, there was a conference at Camp Ramah in Darom to celebrate 40 years of women being ordained by the JTS and the conservative movement. And in a little bit less than a month now, Rabbi Amy Roth, who was ordained in 1990, just 5 years after they began ordaining women, who worked here for 11 years, is going to be here as a scholar of residence. Now, just based on my age, graduating in 2004, I actually knew many of the women in this picture. And so though I am a male, I have to admit that, I have a way to sort of perhaps reflect a little bit, but if it's a little skewed from a male perspective, I apologize for that. So in this milestone, where are we in Jewish feminism? Well, we have to go back a little bit to the birth of it, sometime, I guess, in the 1950s, 1960s, where there was a question, having this long tradition of male-dominated culture. Do we totally reconstruct a new tradition, albeit sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater? Or do we work with what we have and basically refine the women's voices? We haven't thrown out their tradition. We kept it for two reasons. One, it is so rich. Putting aside whatever male bias there is so much about loving our neighbor as ourselves and all of the things that come into being Jewish. And the women are there. Rebecca is there. Sarah, Rachel, Deborah, all of the women that we know of. Their voices are there, and the unknown women's voices are there to be found. If the rabbis could read in this yeshiva of Shem, Noah's son, which didn't factually exist according to the Torah, then we can create women's narratives. Perhaps Shifra and Pua, the Egyptian midwives. Who are they? It says they fear God. So what is their spiritual voice? And the other thing that was interesting reading Judith Plaskow, who wrote a book called Standing Again at Sinai, because she recognized the women were there. The text says the men and the women were at Sinai. We just need to go back there to hear their voices. Noted that in the general feminist movement, even in the 1960s, anti-Semitism was present. So to have this dream that Judaism would go away and the Jews could totally assimilate, something that even Theodore Herzl hoped that he could do, doesn't exist when we have anti-Semitism and when our tradition is really too rich to give up. So we have established that we need to keep the tradition. We find our women's voices. And what does that mean? It's really a process that's only been going on for 40, 50 years. And we have 2,000 years before that, even more than that. Torah's 3,000 years, 2,000 years since the birth of the rabbis. We have only a little bit of a snippet of history. So it began a little muddled. of men and women should do exactly the same things. That's equity, right? That's equality. But we quickly learned that that's not the case. Men and women may be equal, but they are different. They have different experiences. No man will ever give birth to a child. And that is one of the most spiritual things that can happen in our world and is a gift from God. So to expect that men and women to experience God and spirituality in exactly the same ways doesn't make sense. So that manifested itself, especially in some of the most physical things that we do as Jews, wearing a talit, and on weekdays, wearing tefillin. Now, for rabbinical students, they still say, really, men and women should experience and be knowledgeable in that big mitzvah. This is the uniform of Jewish prayer and spirituality. But for many women, this room included, those were not easy rituals. And I, as a man, I'm not going to be able to explain it. So I'm just going to sort of say, women have said it's hard to put on a garment that has been known as a man's garment for 2,000 years. And yes, these leather boxes are weird. And it doesn't fit well on feminine hair. Now, women have experienced it. I'm not saying you can't. Rashi's daughters were known to do it. But the feedback that came back to all of us together was this might not be the best way to hear women's voices. There are plenty of other spiritual modes that we can hear women's voices. And that has come true. Just look at our Kol Isha program 2 years in. If you come here on a Sunday morning, you will see 30, 40, 50 women learning with Rachel, learning to chant, learning to pray, getting to know their tradition. That is how we find women's voices. So we just have to know that this is a very new enterprise of hearing and including women's voices and taking a tradition that we don't want to throw all of it out. We just want to maybe really add the woman's voice to already what's there. And that's what we're doing right now. That's what we do in this congregation. Women chanting, Kol Isha. Yes, challah bakes. There's nothing wrong with women needing challah and recognizing that for generations, that was actually a way that women experienced sort of the power and the knowledge of the ability to have childbirth and the ability for healing in this world. So instead of saying, that's just a woman's job, why are we doing it? Where's the equity? Say, we are going to work together to continue to find both men and women's voices to create a Judaism for the 21st century that is very much tradition, but also change where it is needed. And so I really encourage all of you, if you can, to join us on that Hanukkah, Friday on December 19th, and that morning, December 20th, to hear Rabbi Roth, and actually some of the Kol Isha women might be trying their hand at singing Hallel that day as well. Shabbat Shalom.